Hello, my name is Michael and welcome to our house and garden here in the village of Woolpit in the heart of Suffolk. In filming the garden, it's allowing me to do a little bit of time travelling. It's actually the first week of May and I thought you'd like to see the wisteria. I planted it on the front of the house when we moved here about 40 years ago. It's looking particularly splendid right now. Sadly, it'll all be over in a couple of weeks and long before the garden is normally open at the end of May. It's mid-May and I've just come to the top of the yard to show you this little area. Originally it was occupied by a breeze block garage and workshop with a corrugated roof. David and I demolished it and we got some local builders in to raise the walls and build this little area. The planting's gone through various schemes from a herb garden to bedding out. Now I'm trying to establish the euonymus. This is what happens when you let aliens freely seed in the border. We'll just go through now to the main garden. The aces are looking particularly nice at this time of the year. This was the garden that came with the house. There was very little here. The grass was waist high. Nice straight borders and tarmac paths. So I got rid of all of that and started a planting scheme. The Gladitsia is now quite mature and looking rather lovely at this time of the year. And facing west, it almost glows in the sunset. The advantage of the houses in this section of the street is they've all got brick walls. We raised them a little. We sustained some storm damage, so I'm waiting for Cecile Brunner to flower and then I can cut her back and sort that out. While I was looking at it, I decided to cut back some of the shrubs. I remember Christopher Lloyd saying, when shrubs get too big, don't just do nothing. Either prune them or get rid of them and make some room. Well, I certainly hacked them back. When we got the land in sections to the rear here, it meant that I could punch through the wall and made this little window. And we've just come up, the Montana's looking rather nice, into the Shakespeare Garden. We call this the Shakespeare Garden because, not surprisingly, there is a bust of Shakespeare at the top of the garden. It's something we bought from the Chelsea Flower Show several years ago now. He was just ahead, so we had to find a stonemason to give him a bust and a column. And he's quite an imposing figure, which meant that this part of the garden needed to be somewhat formal. The hedging is purple brunus and copper beech. Normally it would have had a light trim at this time of the year, but with the lockdown, Dan, who usually does our hedge trimming, hasn't been free to get round to do it. I wanted to build a summer house, and I was inspired by some designs by a lesser known architect by the name of Batty Langley, who went on the grand tour and came back with a series of designs for umbrellos to terminate a walk or view. I retired about 4 years ago, so I had the time to work on a design and spend a summer building this rather nice building. I've always been keen on shells and grottos, so I thought it'd be fun to do a shell ceiling in here to emulate 18th century plasterwork. It's quite a nice place to sit during the day out of the full sunlight and heat of the day. The Mutabilis rose is in flower at the moment. It just picks up the candles of the chestnut in the next garden. been so hot and sunny these last few days, I've just held back, waiting for the irises to come into flower, and they are looking quite spectacular. But we'll go there in just a minute. I'll just show you the main part of the garden here. As you can see, it's a mixture of fruit, vegetables and ornamentals. There's young Mr. Repton, a little fun thing to have in the garden. I've got about 26 different varieties of apples, which are a mixture of heritage and modern varieties. There's 8 varieties of pears, we've got plums, cherries, there's all sorts of mixed fruit. The parsnips are coming on, sweet peas, the winter lettuce, and we're just coming up to what was the asparagus border, but honestly, with Suffolk being so dry, it was hardly worth growing it, and actually you can buy very good asparagus locally. So I thought, I've always loved peonies, and I thought, well, why not have a peony border? And then I thought, well, actually they only flower a certain time of the year, so I interspersed them, alternate planting with peonies and dahlias, and that's quite a shocking pink, but it's a very jolly colour at this time of the year. That's a lovely peony there called Coral Sunset. It fades to a sort of soft peachy colour, and there's the iris border just looking gorgeous. It's a collection of irises. I've got some Benton irises there. That dark mauve one, blue one is a Benton iris, and the scent is quite strong. And we're just coming up to the top part of the garden. Historically, the garden at this end, I think, has been used as a dumping ground for generations. So whenever I try to plant anything, I've always been digging up saucepans and bits of old bicycles and even a kitchen range and lots of bricks. So there were so many bricks that David and I, over one winter, created these 3 circles, which Stanley calls the ring cycle. So Lord of the Rings, Wagner's ring cycle, so I've made a ring to go over the top. I've always admired laburnum tunnels and arches, but I thought it'd be fun to make a ring, so that seems to be working rather well. It's only 2 years old. Just through there I have 4 bays for compost. As you can imagine, this garden generates an awful lot of waste, so it's all shredded up and makes some very good compost, which I spread on the soil. Actually, the birds are very good because I just dump it in the middle, and they just spread it around looking for the little grubs and worms that hide inside. One of the advantages of living in the centre of the village is that you have nice roof lines and chimneys, and of course the spire of St Mary's Church. While the sun is shining, I'd like to bring you to this part of the garden. Several years ago I created 2 raised beds for camellias and rhododendrons. It's not an ideal place to grow either of them, as it's not acid soil here. The camellias struggle a bit, but the rhododendrons are looking very nice indeed, and I'm rather pleased with that. This area here contains a pond. We have a solar panel which operates a little Godzilla there, who throws out a little spout of water. And it's quite a nice area of the garden to come and have drinks in towards the end of an evening. Just see the wisteria coming out there, and through the Shakespeare hedge I've just cut through so you get various vistas of the garden. The wisteria was planted many years ago. I bought it from a little pépinière in France, and it had flowered, and I planted it, and it grew and grew and grew, but not a sign of flowers for many, many years. And at the point that I said, right, that's it, it's coming out, suddenly, wow, it's like a tremendous waterfall. and quite beautiful. And here we are back almost where we started. I hope you've enjoyed this little time virtual tour of the garden. Managed to see the garden at different times during the month. Normally we would open at the end of May, and we're almost there now. We plan to open at the end of August, though of course nobody knows what's going to happen between now and then, if not hopefully next year. But I hope you've enjoyed this little tour, and maybe I'll see you in person in the future. Bye bye.